Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here once again. Josh Taylor from CE Podcast, Canine Education. So let's get right into it. You have messaged me many times about wanting to know more about reactivity. So they want a podcast on reactivity. Now, I think it's one of the most popular reasons for me in existence as a dog trainer. I think I deal with a lot of reactivity, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of aggression. I deal with a lot of behavior modification. There's no question about that. A lot of it has been self-taught. I obviously also have certificates to go along with that, but definitely a lot of this has been learning from experts in a science-based traditional way. Or I guess I'm just so used to science-based being traditional, but I guess theoretically it's not a traditional, practice yet. I say that there's still a lot of techniques that are being used that are not science-based. Nonetheless, so to get into it, okay, reactivity for me is a big deal. Lots of people come to me with this problem. Reactivity. Let me give you an example of reactivity or someone who may be, going through the same form of struggle that you might be going through. Okay, so what does reactivity look like? Could be you're walking down the street and your dog reacts to everything that moves. Could be just dogs. Could be just cars. Could be a little bit of everything. Could be noticing that it's getting worse over time. Could be inside the house, you have more reactivity. So when people come over and stuff like that, especially with COVID, it's happening more and more now, where, life is kind of a little bit kind of normal. So there, and that's just one form of reactivity. I mean, we have so many other type of reactivities that we can get into, but I want to focus maybe a little bit on, I don't want to say one form of reactivity, but let's just say reactivity in the sense where they just can't regulate. So your dog goes for a walk with you and it's hot and cold. Some dogs they bark at, some dogs they don't. Some people they bark at, some people they don't. And you might be scratching your head thinking, what's wrong with my dog? It would be normal for your dog who has reactivity, who has these self-regulating issues to bark at one person and not the other. Okay, so let's just use humans. Let's use the most common one. The most emails I got for the podcast was about dog reactivity. So you know what? I'm going to try to stick to that genre right now. Okay, so when it comes to reacting to other dogs and it's hot and cold, so some of the big things that we look at here, all right? Distance. So when I'm dealing with a dog who is very reactive with other dogs, my main objective here is distance. Why? Because I can control the reactivity based off of my distance. And this is usually part of one of my behavior modification programs. I think that to go along with distance, something that comes into my mind is when I talk about treats. So the moment I say treat, a lot of people will say things like, oh, my dog won't take food when we're outside in that environment, or when there's another dog around. My dog is too focused on the other dog. If that is really the case, you have to understand that means you're too close. Okay? And I'll give you a great example. We use food as a gauge, okay? Or whatever the treat is as a gauge. So treat doesn't necessarily mean food, number one. But it is definitely a phenomenal way for us to tell whether or not our dog is at that stress level, that heightened level where I'm just not focused on anything else but whatever I'm looking at. So when you try to, put something in front of them and they don't want it, and it's usually something that they go absolutely crazy for, this obviously tells us that our dog is stressed at the moment. We're too close. We need distance. We need to get out of there. Okay. A lot of the times it's usually too late, to be honest. If you're in that place where you've already lost them. Okay. So everyone rushes this. Everyone I've ever met, okay, will usually rush this, and they will be going in front of places where lots of action happens and there's so much reactivity and the dog is just so stressed. I mean, it's considered flooding at that point. These are all things that will generally make the behavior not really go anywhere. I don't even want to say worse, by the way, okay? Because it is what it is, okay? We can get into what makes behaviors worse, okay? But that's not what we're here for. We're here about figuring out what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live and work our dog through these type of scenarios. So I'm going to give you some basics that I talk about in my behavior modification programs. So distance is number one. I want you to find a distance where you are more likely to succeed, where your dog is able to actually focus on these dogs and not have a reaction. And if you tell me, Josh, there is absolutely no distance where my dog does not react, I've seen maybe one of those and trust me, I see a lot. And I've seen maybe only one of those in the past 15 years. Okay, so there is a distance where they can basically be looking at dogs and, chill. Like things are not too bad. All right. Now, I'm trying to get into, before some of you might be saying like, what about stuff prior to behavior modification, like obedience? Does your dog, do you know baselines? Can you get your dog to do just basic obedience in the sense of like sit down, stay, focus, look at me, touch? All of these things are obviously very important, okay? And it helps. And obviously we try to make sure that we have some of these things when we're dealing with a dog with behavior, where we're doing behavior modification. But again, I'm just kind of giving you the insight on what you can start doing to work your dog in these scenarios. So I'm not necessarily talking about all the other stuff, all right? Like I said, there's so much to get into. I could go back about 15 steps from where I'm talking about distance right now. No joke. I could go back 15 steps and I can talk about how we need to make sure that, our dog has good pre-mac principles, can do temptation games very well, can focus on you, will choose to look at you versus the environment. There's so much to get into. All right. So I'm just trying to keep like a straight line on the sense of reactivity and what you can do in these moments. All right. So distance is definitely very important. So what does this look like? I mean, I'm not going to go on a trail that's, a foot or 2 feet width wise where I have to pass by other dogs and my dog is Cujo. Okay. This is not going to be a good situation for us. So we want to try to stay away from that. All right. What we do though with distance is, go to areas where there's like dog parks, not in the dog park. Okay. No, not in the dog park, but in the parking lot, far, far, far away. Or, at the entrance of a trail where there's lots of dogs, things like this. This is what you're aiming for. You want your dog to get a good amount of exposure, but in an environment where the dog will be less stressful, okay, or less stressed, sorry. So, the idea here is not to throw your dog into a dog park, which I hear a lot of trainers talk about. Let's throw our dog into the dog park. This is not something we want to focus on, all right? I want you to focus on distance, working on getting your dog to see a couple of dogs here and there. I like to, as you progress and things are getting better, you can go at like more prime times where there's more dogs. But once again, you're at a distance where your dog is just kind of coasting. Your dog is just kind of watching. All right. That's a big one. The other one that I think is so important is meal times. All right. Stop using meal times for nothing. Start bringing meals with you on that walk so that you can focus. Start getting your dog to eat their breakfast in front of the dog park. You could be right outside your car. You don't have to be close. But the idea here is I would be using a handful at a time when my dog is actually looking at these dogs and things are going well. This is how my dog gets to eat their meal. It doesn't have to be like this every day, but the idea is that we're getting our dog to not only work for their meal, which is phenomenal for mental stimulation, but ditching the bowl has so many benefits. So that would be definitely another big step for us when it comes to behavior modification. A lot of people that talk to me about picky eaters and this and that, there are ways, okay, to get your dog to eat their food. All right. So now we have ditching the bowl, and we also have a little bit of working with distance. All right. The other thing is, of course, their cup. All right. There is only a certain amount of time that you can do this before they become overstimulated. Let's talk because there's so many forms of overstimulation. They could shut down. They could get more reactive. They could. Let's just focus on one form of that cup getting full. Let's say you're doing exactly what I'm asking. You're at the park. You're at the distance. You're letting your dog see dogs. Everything is going really good. You haven't changed distance at all. You haven't changed anything. All of a sudden, your dog becomes a little bit more reactive. And you're maybe scratching your head a little bit like, hey, what's going on here? It was so good just a second ago. That means that your cup is full, your dog's cup, and your cup probably. All right. So with that cup being full, it is time to leave. Now, just so that we're clear, it would be incredible if you could be proactive and start learning and visualizing when that cup is getting full, just based off of your dog's body language and behavior. Everyone always ends when things are going bad. Okay, if you can start proactively ending when things are good, okay, this will change so much. All right, remember, the whole idea here when we're in a behavior modification program is trust. All right, we need to get the dog to trust us, because somewhere down the line, the dog can't, or the dog doesn't believe that he or she can. And that's not a shot at you, okay? I don't mean trust like, your dog doesn't love you and so on. It just means that, they can't cope, or, they need more coping strategies. They don't know what to do when they get into that overstimulated mindset. And then it's just, it's out of control. So let's make sure that we are proactively ending on good notes. This would be extremely important for us. Okay. Another thing that I think is so overlooked, all right, is your leash. What I mean by your leash is the idea when you're at these distances is to actually have a loose leash and speak to your dog. Talk to them. Let them hear that voice. They've done studies where they've worked with pitches, and it's super interesting. So I'll give you an example. They actually say that, I wish I could pull up this study because I'm sure people are going to email me about it. But I remember, vividly, I remember seeing this study about how when women speak to dogs, they deliver more of that oxytocin to the brain, because of how they're speaking, that soft tone. And so the dog is getting more of that hug hormone, And apparently when men would speak to dogs, we would stress them. Go figure, Nonetheless, all right, I would really suggest, all right, that we talk more with, of course, that soft tone. So when I'm outside, when I'm walking my dog, when I see, a child walking across the street and my dog is interested, right away I start talking. Is my dog reactive to children? Absolutely not. But the idea here is that I'm proactively letting my dog know that this is a good thing. All right. So as that child is walking and my dog is super hyper focused, I'm saying, oh, you're such a good dog. That's a good dog. And I may even be rewarding. It could be throwing a ball. It could be giving a treat. It could be just giving affection with a little pat. But the idea is that you are rewarding these good moments. All right. And you are using your voice, that soft tone. Okay. So important. So make sure that that's happening while you're using that leash, okay? Now, going back to the leash part, it is imperative that your leash is loose. The only time, especially in behavior modification, the only time where I ask my client to tighten up on the leash, and this is an exception because obviously I don't want any tightness at all, and we don't want to get into that situation ever. But I mean, it's life, okay? People are going to sometimes come right at us, or whatever the case, and the dog could be aggressive with people. I know we're talking about dogs, but just hear me out. So when I'm in that tough situation, obviously, it would make a little bit of sense that we're going a little bit short on the leash because we don't want our dog to actually hurt whoever or whatever is happening. Okay. But in all other circumstances, all right, when we have that distance, when we're working on that behavior modification from that distance, we should have a loose leash. Okay. There should be no tightness. All right. And again, if that's impossible, well, this is all of those things that we're talking about from the past that we can get into. Okay, sorry, in the past. What I meant was these are all the things that we can get into, like the touch, the focus, all of those obedience things that we can work on, including heel in general. All right, but I talked a little bit about loose leash walking and so on in the podcast before this one, Pulling 2.0. All right. So the idea here, once again, is you have a loose leash so that you're not sending any warning signals to the dog. You're talking to your dog, delivering more oxytocin to the brain. You're going to scenarios where your dog is at their most weak. So if that means dogs, then I'm going to dog parks, but I'm keeping my distance. I'm letting my dog soak it all up, and I'm rewarding them for no reactivity. And then I'm going to try to get a little bit closer to the dog park. Here is, I think the most important thing that everyone needs to realize. All right. The most important thing to realize about all of this is that this takes time. All right. So when it comes to obedience, like sit, stay, lay down, etc., your dog is fast. That's like showing a child a certain skill and they pick it up real quick, okay? Like playing soccer, kicking a ball into the net. Of course, there's different techniques and this and that, but relatively speaking, most situations, they'll learn that pretty quick, all right? You have to understand, though, that when you're dealing with these reactivities, when you're dealing with that heart going so fast, when you're dealing with anxiety, okay, you have to understand that you are now dealing with a disability, all right? So with a disability being said, you have to understand that these things take a lot of time. And I think that is one of the big stressors when it comes to being a dog trainer. I think everyone is expecting real quick results. And I remember being aversive, okay, and getting results much faster. Now, when I say results, let me just explain to you what I mean by this. I would be getting results faster, meaning I would be correcting the actual reaction to whatever the situation was. So my dog is lunging at dogs. I was using aversive methods. I would get my dog to stop lunging at dogs or barking at dogs. Hence, I fixed the problem. Okay. But I didn't really fix the problem. I didn't fix the underlying problem. All right. So the behavior problem was still there. All right. And I think that is something that is super crucial to get from what you're doing here. All right. We are not trying to focus on the aversive method here in order to fix just the barking. We're trying to get them to actually believe that dogs are okay again, that they can trust us, that, things are better than just what they think is going to happen when that dog comes up to them, whatever they're thinking in their head. So I want you to understand that these things take a lot of time. Some dogs, it could be months or even years. Some dogs are really out there where they need to get into, we need to get into medication. I am pro med. I talk to some of the best veterinarians in Montreal. I work with all of them, not exclusively or anything, but in the sense where I'll recommend a client to go see them. They'll go on whatever the medication the veterinarian thinks is best, and then they'll come back to me and we'll continue to work. We do this. I do this quite often, actually, depending on the case. We work together to help, and we help thousands. We really do. We help thousands. So understand, though, that this is a lot of work. And so when you start at this distance, do not expect in 1 week to be in front of the dog park, like the fence. All right. You have to understand that your dog is going through something extremely anxiety related, if not anxiety itself. And like people, this takes time. I'm tired of people thinking that these are going to be quick things. All right. It's not, guys. It really is not. It takes time. And I think maybe as a dog trainer, because I'm always critical about how I do things, I probably don't say it enough. And it's not because I don't want to tell them or this or that. It's just, I guess sometimes as a dog trainer, we get into ourselves a little too much and we think like it's obvious. Like, well, obviously it's going to be a long time, right? But that's not the case, right? That's why we're the expert. And so I think it's important. And now I try to lead with that a lot more. I try to let people know, like, this is a project, like, this is going to take some time. I think it's important to understand as a dog trainer that we need to guide these people and get them to understand that this is a time thing, that this really is a disability. And I want to use my son here as an example. So my son, Jet, he has dyspraxia, along with apraxia, severe apraxia. And he also has autism. And so we have OT and we have speech therapy. It's a great example. Once in a while I'll talk to the OT or the speech therapist and I'll be like, okay, when is he going to be able to count to 10? Like, when is he going to be able to do this? Like it's been this long that we've been doing this, and yeah, sure, maybe I could practice more at home or this and that, but like, shouldn't he get this by now? And I'm hearing myself talk and I'm saying to myself, like, my gosh, I sound like some of the people that get into behavior modification, like in my field. And so they tell me, like, no, like, this is a lifelong thing. Like, this is something that is going to take time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, why was that not clear for me? Why did I think that I was going to do a little bit of speech, a little bit of OT, and my son was just going to be like, this aspiring athlete, And I still truly believe that all of those things will happen if that's what he wants. But for me to be like, why isn't he playing football yet? Right? With dyspraxia, like, you need to really harness what is realistic. And I think that's such an important thing to remember. So I have a very, very different perspective now when I look at, when I look at dog training, but also when I look at my son. And so I relate my son to a lot of things. I don't know if that's weird, but I guess for me, it's not weird because I look at dogs the same. That sounds weird. I look at dogs the same, like, in the sense that my dog is sentient. I love my dog. I don't want pain. I don't want suffering. I don't want, I want a good relationship. I want my dog to get better and better. And I mean, my child, I obviously want everything for him. I want everything. I want him to be able to do anything he wants. When I see him running in the class or outside in the park with his friends, I know that he takes a little bit longer and he's a little bit slower, but he's having so much fun, and he's perfectly fine with the fact that right now that he knows he's not the fastest, but he keeps trying. He has such an incredible heart. And I believe my son is like that because of my wife and I. I think that my son is excited and happy and not thinking about how slow he is because physically how slow he is because of the fact that we're there and we're telling him, like, you can do this. No, you can do this. You can do this. And it's the same thing with your animal. And so I guess that's why I have such an easy time understanding that when it comes to behavior modification with our dog, that it's something that takes time. So, I guess I just want you to know that that things can be very similar. Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, so I'm trying to keep it all together. Okay, while I finish this, the rest of this podcast. I guess it's just important to understand that whether the dog is a dog or whether it's a human, when we're dealing with disabilities, when we're dealing with having to modify something, it takes time. We have to change emotions. We have to change what happens inside of you when you react a certain way. And I think a lot of people don't understand just how challenging that is. So the next time you're noticing that your dog is super highly reactive, understand that this is more than just, correct your dog or whatever trainer or scenario that you're doing. Understand that this is not a quick fix. And if it's a quick fix, it either wasn't anxiety to begin with, it wasn't, anything that deemed modification wise, or you are just basically putting a Band-Aid and masking the actual problem. And it will turn around and bite you in the butt at some point. Okay. Not literally, but, yeah. All right. So, I hope you liked that little bit on reactivity. So just to get closing statement here, some of the things that I want you to focus on if you're dealing with reactivity is distance, intensity, knowing when your dog is overstimulated, when it's time to leave, hopefully before that, trying to be proactive, and understand that it takes time, that it can take months or even years. Understand that you have theoretically a child on your hands. And just like children, they're not always born equally. Some have disabilities, some don't. So understand that when what you signed up for is generally when it's anxiety related, it's long term. All right. And you're looking for these mini goals. And when we get into a little bit more of the podcasts on reactivity and what we're talking about right now, like behavior modification, I will get into what these mini, what mini wins actually look like. Okay. How you can kind of measure success when it comes to reactivity. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. This is Josh Taylor from CE Podcast, Canine Education. If you want to email us to talk about either being on our show or just have a suggestion or want me to talk about something very specific, why don't you give me a shout? It's CE Podcast at canineeducation.ca. All right. And again, it's Josh Taylor from CE Podcast. Take care. Bye.